Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I came across an article this morning about the NFL Players Association making proposals to the NFL to reduce penalties for recreational marijuana use. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. All right, this is interesting. As you guys know, I'm one of those people, I'm not really big on drug testing in sports. I think it's a waste of time, I think it's a waste of effort, and I think it's quite frankly, something that ends up just punishing unlucky players because the environment we live in today, modern sports are so competitive and cheating has become such an art form that you basically can't win anymore without basically breaking the rules and using drugs of some type, PEDs. Anyone in denial of that has not been keeping up with things for the past 10 to 20 years. They're completely out of the loop and delusional fans who actually don't follow what's really going on if they don't understand that at this point. But that being said, when it comes to marijuana, we're dealing with something a little bit different. And as they brought up, look, a lot of the guys who are using it recreationally, they're using it oftentimes for semi-medical reasons. These are often players who are using it to try to treat their depression a bit. They're depressed. Or they're using it as a mild painkiller because their training, the gameplay, everything else involved can really beat up your body tremendously. It can beat up your body tremendously. Now, this organization isn't saying that this is the best way to treat these things because it really isn't. I mean, marijuana is probably not the best form of treatment for depression. It seems to help some people a little bit, but it's hardly an approved antidepressant. As far as it being a painkiller, yeah, actually that seems to be a viable use of this substance. One reason it is prescribed medically. Compared to some other painkillers, less addictive, less toxic. Still not good for your lungs, but I mean, risk aside, it's debatable on that. But they're pointing out the real thing here is that these are players who are suffering some other sort of health issue, whether it's physical or mental, and here's what we need to be concerned about. Modern sports, the reason we have drug testing now has become more and more admitted that this is about the health of the players and the health of young men and women who are coming up and just getting started into sports so as to not to encourage drug use that might harm them, because that's what it's about. It's no longer about fair play in sports, because anyone who thinks there's fair play in sports, the idea is absurd. There are inherent unfairnesses in people's genetics alone. All right, there is no fair play. The drugs that are banned, testosterone, HGH, stuff like that, different people actually produce these things naturally in different amounts. It's already unfair when you have someone out there who produces twice as much testosterone and twice as much growth hormone as other people. All right, the fact that there are those people who exist, and they tend to do very well in sports, from a young age, the fact that those people exist already means it's not a fair playing field. They're already producing more of the anabolic drugs that people are injecting just naturally, because these are substances that occur in your body. People need to understand that. It's not a fair playing field. Some people recover better than others do just inherently, genetically. All right, it's one of the reasons people use these drugs for faster recovery. There's a lot of inherent unlevelness in sports already. It's not a level playing field. People have different ability levels. It's not a fair playing field. It's about who's going to do the best. And here's another thing to consider. People are like, well, that's external stuff they're paying for. Well, you know what? Sometimes the best coaches and training in the world are something external they're paying for also. Still comes down to people with access to more resources and more other things outside of their inherent talents oftentimes still have an advantage. All right, they have advantages for a wide variety of reasons. And what people have admitted largely in our laws, I'm talking about in the United States, and the NFL is a United States agency, have admitted really their concerns mostly, and this is what the Congress has admitted in their discussions on drugs in sports, as they have dedicated a fair amount of floor time to it, that it's about protecting children. And it's about the health of the athletes. They don't like the idea that athletes are going to be forced to use drugs that could harm them just to be competitive. That's the real concern. That's what we're talking about. All right, that is what we're worried about, that athletes are going to have to use drugs that might harm themselves just to be competitive. And that's the point we're at already. It's not like it hasn't been that way a while, but that's the concern. It's about the athlete's health. All right, because if they're all forced to use them to be competitive, which they pretty much are now, then they're all being forced to take health risks to be good at what they do for a living. And that's problematic. That really is a problem for sports when you think about it. Furthermore, that's also encouraging a younger generation that if Congress and media and everyone admit this, and that's what they've said, they don't want it admitted. Because that will then tell 15, 16, 17-year-olds, hey, if you want to be good at sports and make it, you're going to have to cheat. You're going to have to use drugs. They're going to start using them younger. And what do we know about a lot of these anabolic drugs? They're more dangerous the younger you start using them. Meaning starting to take them at 16 or 17 years old and be a lot more harmful to people than people who start taking them at 22, 23, something like that. There's a big difference in the negative effects they can have on a developing body. So that is an enormous concern, an absolutely enormous concern. Our concern is the health of the athletes. Well, we're coming back to, are we banning this over concerns of the health of the athletes? Or are we banning it just because it's a controlled substance? What the heck's going on here? Now, if athletes are taking this for actual health reasons, should we really be penalizing them? And it's one thing if they're abusing it. And so that's what they're talking about, testing the levels in there and tripling the amount in their bloodstream that's going to get them a game suspension. Because people who are just using sometimes recreational amounts are not abusing it. They're using it to deal with some depression. They're using it to deal with the pain of injuries or overtraining and everything else in their sport. Particularly something like the NFL. The NFL is a contact sport. It's a power sport and a contact sport. I mean, you talk about a sport to where you can really rack up some injuries and get some pain. I mean, that's near the top of the list. The NFL is near the top of the list. So if they're using it for these purposes, the real problem we've got is that are we really looking after the health of the athletes if they're having to take something that's banned to deal with either a mild emotional issue, which again is a health issue, or a pain issue? Should we be penalizing these players for this? Is that actually looking out for their best interests? Or should we mandate a policy to where they triple the amount so then they make sure they're abusing it before they go ahead and slap them with a sanction, make them miss games, make them pay fines, and instead when they get caught with lower levels in there, they get sent out to a physician or they get sent to a therapist to find out what's going on. Are they using this as kind of a band-aid for some sort of health problem? And if they are, then that needs to be addressed, because the health of the athletes, the health of the players really is the most important thing. That's what we should be concerned about. And if they're having to use it for that purpose, then maybe they need to get a little extra medical care. Maybe they need to have medical doctors step in and give them a little bit of extra help. And it's not like they can't afford it, guys. The NFL can afford this. The players can afford this. But it's about, look, are we banning people for something when we should be concerned more about their health and find out why they're actually using it? And I think that's a lot fair. It's a step in the right direction, because what we've talked about a lot in the past, because you can't detect drugs all the time. You know what, guys? Drug testing beating methods have become so complex and it's become such a big business that it's $1 billion business right now. All right. You guys remember, like, on, who was it? Victor Conte was interviewed by Joe Rogan and everything. He talked about this in detail. He ran his whole business on this. He ran an entire company making designer drugs, designer PEDs, designer steroids to beat testing, to be ahead of the testing. And he said there's at least a dozen other labs doing the same thing, and they all have thousands of clients. So when we get to a point where that's what's going on, you're not going to catch the athletes on that. But what we need to do is step back and say, okay, well, why are we actually doing the testing in the first place? We're doing the testing because ultimately it has been determined that oftentimes there are health risks associated with these drugs that people are using. They're health risks. It's not even about cheating anymore. It's about, are people having to use dangerous substances to be competitive, for there to even be a level playing field? And if that's the case, then this is a health issue in sports. All right, this is a health issue in sports. Well, how do we resolve this? We need to make sure the athletes are healthy. All right. Not about the level playing field, because some athletes can use more of a drug than others before it starts to harm their health. So there's been a lot of talks of replacing drug testing and drug metabolite testing and drug level testing with health marker testing. Because if our concern is the health of the athletes, then we need to be looking at their actual health. We need to see if that athlete is doing something that is harming his health. And if he is, then we need to get him out of the sport for the sake of his own health, or he's going to have to back down whatever he is using to pass the health marker tests. And until he can come up with proper health markers on his blood work and vitals and physicals, then they're not going to be competing. So they will have to address that themselves. They will have to regulate whatever they're choosing to put into their bodies to be competitive. They're going to have to keep them regulated down by keeping their health in check. And you know what? I like that idea, because this is really a push in the right direction. All right, this is a push in the right direction of actually looking out for the athletes themselves, which drug testing for a long time didn't. And it just kind of left people out there on their own. But now it's talking about, okay, your blood pressure has to be in range. Your hematocrit levels have to be in range. Your cholesterol has to be in range. All these things that we're concerned about that's going to hurt these people in the long term, that's what we check. And if they keep those health markers good and they appear to be healthy, they keep playing. But if they're using something, whether it's a dangerous training protocol that could actually show up on your blood work, or a drug that is harming them, destroying their HDL cholesterol, their good cholesterol, raising their bad cholesterol, something that's really messing with their fasting blood glucose in a negative way, then it's time to say, okay, you got to quit putting into your body whatever it is you're using, because this is hurting you. And if you're not going to quit doing that, you're not going to compete. And that's, I think, a much better approach. It's a much better approach, because then we're really looking out for what's important, the health of the athletes. And then for this next generation of young guys coming in, if they get into the mindset of understanding that their health is going to be tested, they're going to be using a lot less drugs. They're going to be more moderate in their use of whatever they put in their body. They're going to be more careful about what they put in their body, because they know that their health markers are going to be tested. And it sends another message. It sends another message. It's no longer telling the athletes, we're going to punish you for doing whatever it takes to win, but then we're going to give you millions of dollars in medals if you get away with it. Instead of telling them that, we're telling them, look, we care about your health, and if you're going to compete, then you're going to have to stay healthy. All right, because sports is about health and fitness and athleticism, and if you're not going to be healthy and you're going to just do bad things to your body to where you are no longer healthy, then you're not going to compete. You're supposed to be setting an example of fitness and health. And I think that sends a massively different message. And so changing something like a policy on marijuana, like they're talking about, is kind of a step in the right direction there. It's looking out for what's more important here, the actual health of the athletes, and creating a level playing field in the sense that at least everyone out there is doing whatever it takes to win while maintaining their health and fitness, because that's what sports was supposed to be about. Being the best that you could be in your sport as an example of athleticism and fitness. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.